The phrase, "it's not rocket science," is probably what inspired this book. Think Like a Rocket Scientist is a book by Ozan Varol. I'm sorry if I butcher your name, I don't know how to pronounce it. And it's more or less a self-help book. But unlike most self-help books, this book actually has pretty realistic strategies that can be applied to daily life. Okay, so starting off, since this isn't a story, I can't really give you a summary of what the book is about because it's a self-help book. It has guides on how to be better at, simple strategies you can use to make giant leaps in work and life. What this basically means is that you can launch rockets figuratively, as in you plan things out, you try, you test, you fail, you try, you test again, and eventually you fly by achieving whatever you wanted to achieve. The book is split into three main sections. The first one is the preparation stage. The second one is kind of like launching, but testing, like half launching. And then you get into the full launch and it just all works out in the end. As a review, I'm just going to list a few of the things that I found like most important sections of the book. The first one is the test as you fly principle. What I mean by that is basically, instead of working really hard on a project, but then not really testing it, you should always be testing your project every time you make a few steps, you see if it works. Now, the reasoning behind this is that if you don't, there's a good chance that when you do actually get to the big deadline, the day where you're supposed to finish, you try it and it fails horribly. It feels really bad. Another part of this tip is that when you test as you fly, you have to test it as realistically as possible. Don't just test it as in, oh, by my unrealistic standards, this kind of works, because quite honestly, sometimes the situation that you're testing it in is not the same as when you're actually using it. And the parallel for this to rocket science is that when you test a rocket on land, you have to simulate a lot of the things that would happen in space, a lot of the terrible accidents that could happen, things breaking off, things not working, heat. A lot of problems are difficult to simulate on land, but you still have to go through with it instead of just pretending that, oh, under Earth circumstances, our rocket works, because honestly, it won't work when you test it in space. So I think this is a pretty interesting principle to start off with. So the second principle I'm going to talk about is aiming for progress. Every single principle in this entire book is actually pretty much aimed at aiming for progress. So what does it mean? Well, aiming for progress, according to Ozan Varol, is the ability to realize that there's a lot of problems with the traditional or the correct way to do things. A lot of amazing successes, like just listing them off, like SpaceX, which is one that the author actually very specifically stated again and again as an example. SpaceX used a lot of unconventional strategies that were not used by rocket scientists when they started. The creator, obviously, Elon Musk, he didn't do things the conventional way for multiple reasons. One of those, an example is that when he bought rockets, he had to buy them from very specific places. He got them from scrapyards. He got them from lots of random places that people usually just don't find rockets in. He also built the rocket horizontally so that you wouldn't have to build it on a huge structure vertically and with the danger of people falling off. A horizontal rocket is a lot more safe. It's just that it requires a huge amount of force to push it and stand it into an upright position. These are all aiming to fix conventional problems by using unconventional solutions, which is a huge thing in this book. Now, how this draws to real life, our daily lives, is that sometimes when you do something, you have to think about ways that everyone has been doing it or people have been telling you to do it, and then add your own personal flair or just change it altogether. Unlearn the way that you have learned it before and try something new. This will just make you be able to do things usually better than other people. And if it doesn't work, you just learn a lesson. A final useful tip in this book that I really like is keep things simple. That in and of itself is pretty simple, but it's very useful. When something becomes too complex, they have more weaknesses. They're much more easily broken. You could say that they're better in some ways. They're more efficient. They're more effective. But honestly, complexity doesn't just make something better. It usually makes things worse. When really, really great authors write their books, they're not thinking about how to stuff more content in. They're trying to simplify the content so that it's in a reasonable amount of space. When things are too complex, people don't like to read books that are too complex. And the thing about projects is that the more complexity you add, there's much more complex relations. And there's a certain balance point where something is complex enough to work really well, but also simple enough so that it doesn't get obliterated by the tiniest mistake that causes a cascading problem in the actual system. His example for the rockets were not adding too many things, add a few redundancies, add a few extra bits that might make it useful, but just keeping it in the general shape, the general idea is very, very important, because if you change it too much, if you add tons of gritty details in, one of those details will ruin the ship, and the tiniest margin of error on a rocket ship destroys it. In real life, it just means that sometimes it's smarter to just add less things into something, make something boil down into its essential parts, and try not to add more for the sake of adding more. I know that this sounds a little contrasting to the aim for progress, but progress is often making something simpler, changing the intrinsic property of something, not adding more things into an existing product. Now onto the flaw. The only flaw I can really think of for Think Like a Rocket Scientist is that it is very, very repetitive in some sections. Not all of them. Some sections are concise, quick, but like I said, with the keep things simple tip, honestly, this book itself has a few parts where it doesn't seem to do that very well. And I know that it's for emphasis, right? Repeating something emphasizes the point, but unless you're very slow and you can't catch on, I feel like some points were emphasized enough. For example, the aim for progress thing. The examples, all amazing, but you don't need to keep emphasizing the fact that you need to aim for progress. We get it. It's the point, that's a chapter of the title. It's easy to remember it. And really, I don't think there's that much need for a constant repetitive of, the point. But besides that, I think it's fine. And honestly, it's not a big deal. It's just that I just noticed that when I was reading it, and I felt it could be just removed from the book entirely. So yeah, that's my final review of Think Like a Rocket Scientist. Overall, I think it's a great self-help book. It has good lessons. They're generally simple, generally concise. Basically, all of the tips are important. They matter. And I just love the extra little theme of drawing parallels between rocket science and daily life. So yeah, overall, a really good book. I'm not going to give it a rating because it really doesn't need one. It's self-help. It's simple strategies. And honestly, it does all of it well.